You're fine. We're fine.
Okay, then so I'm okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Just stay put. We're-
আপনাকে কি দেখা যাবে নাকি দেখা যাবে না যখন আমি কথা বলবো?
Absolutely, you will be able to see me. All of us.
যখন শুরু হবে নাকি?
Ji. Okay, stand by. আলাপচারিতা আমন্ত্রণ জানাচ্ছি এবং একটু দেরিতে অনুষ্ঠান শুরু করবার জন্য আন্তরিকভাবে দুঃখিত। অবশ্যই আমাদের আজকের বিষয় কোভিড-19 এবং ম্যানেজমেন্ট অফ কোভিড-19 ইন রিলেশন টু দ্য রিসেন্ট চ্যালেঞ্জেস। কথা বলবার জন্য আমাদের সঙ্গে স্টুডিওতে দুজন অতিথি রয়েছেন এবং আমাদের সঙ্গে অনলাইনে যোগ দিচ্ছেন আরও একজন অতিথি। পরিচয় করিয়ে দিচ্ছি যারা স্টুডিওতে রয়েছে তাদের সঙ্গে। প্রথমে আমার বাঁয়ে রয়েছেন কাউন্সিলর মার্ক সান্তোস, ক্যাবিনেট মেম্বার ফর হেলথ, সোশ্যাল কেয়ার, মেন্টাল হেলথ অ্যান্ড এইজিং। থ্যাংক ইউ, Mrs. Santos, for giving us the time. And next to Mr. Councillor Mark Santos is Mehfooz Afroz, representing, obviously, the Conservative Party. Thank you, Mr. Afroz, for giving us the time.
Thank you very much, Urmee, for inviting us.
And joining us virtually is Mr. Pasha Khondokar, former president of BCA, as a community leader and an entrepreneur. Thank you, Pasha Bhai, for joining us virtually.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so we will start with the current situation. That is, obviously, what we heard, the warning from the government that Britain is at a tipping point. Currently, what we've been told that 6,000 people are infected per day at the moment, and if the trajectory continues, we will see 50,000 people getting infected per day, which is obviously a very warning position. And government is considering whether a national lockdown is necessary. At the moment, there is talk about circuit breaking processes coming into place. At the moment, there are talks and there are number of other initiatives in place whereby local lockdown is considered as in place in some areas. But at the same time, what the Labour Party is saying that whether rather than a second surge of coronavirus, are we going to see a second wave of ministerial mistakes from this current government? What the current government is saying that the allegations from the public as well as from the leading politicians are that current government is blaming the people rather than accepting that the test, trace and tracking system is at the near verge of collapsing. So what exactly is the situation? I'll start with Councillor Santos. What is your observation at this very stage?
I mean, it's really worrying. Any of us that watched the 11 o'clock briefing would have found it incredibly sobering, those statistics that you just quoted, that by October we could see 50,000 new infections every day, and by November 200 deaths per day. And we don't want to get to that point. And actually what I would be saying to people is to remind them of those steps that you can take to avoid or to manage coronavirus risk, and those are about keeping physical distance, keeping 2 meters away from people, to remember to wear face coverings that cover both your mouth and your nose. You don't breathe out of your chin, and the amount of people I've seen wearing them just covering their chin, your mouth and your nose. Do that in shops, public on public transport, in smaller enclosed spaces, the school gate. Make sure that if you cough or sneeze, that you cough into a tissue and bin the tissue, or if you don't have one available, into the crook of your crook of your arm. To wash your hands with soap and hot water to regularly, or to use hand sanitizer if that's not available, and actually to self-isolate if you have COVID-like symptoms. And you
do you believe, obviously these are instructions, regulations, advice we are getting from our health professionals, health colleagues, and
Yes.
obviously as a nationwide reminders on a everyday basis. But what the government is currently saying, that the trajectory is pretty worrying.
Yes.
So what exactly is your observation at this stage, that have we done enough when we came out of the national lockdown, and since then is the test track and isolation
absolutely,
process working?
A key element of our ability to navigate COVID risk is around our test and the testing, and it's around the contact tracing, and both of those are at a collapsing point. I see in my own borough, a couple of Sundays ago, it was heartbreaking to be standing outside the testing centre watching people being turned away from a test because they closed the walk-in facility without even letting the local council know. It's just angry-making that the government have wasted time and not ensured that we had the capacity and the accessibility of testing during the summer months as we're going into the winter. It's just angry-making that they think, what have they been doing? Why is it such a surprise that there would be a surge in cases around this time as we head into the winter period? What have the government been doing? Local government, local councils have been playing their part, ramping up communication on an ongoing basis to people, to playing our part in that equation. But government have failed us, and government have let us down.
I'll come to Pasha Bhai. Pasha Khandekar, former president of BCA. Pasha Bhai, as a businessman and someone who is quite closely involved with the community, how is community feeling about all this data, all this information, at the same time a possible national lockdown which would impact significantly on our business and our livelihood?
Thank you very much. It's beautiful questions. The thing is, people cannot trust this government. It's a measure of trust, because life is at risk. Now the government every day is changing their mind, every day is changing their policy, business policy, health policy, and in this policy, everything changes. It's a last-minute but-on business on COVID started. We have lost officially nearly 42,000 people, unofficially more than that. And now, the government is telling us all those scary things. People are not ready to listen to all those things because people don't trust the government anymore. They cannot believe what the government is telling us now. But if it is fact, if the infection rate is going up, government from starting till now, miserable failure to control this business. They are not listening. They're always last minute. If you look at our business and the rest of the world, they help us many projects. We congratulate them, we appreciate them for their economic incentives they give us. But according to the COVID safety, they couldn't manage it. They are confusing people all the time. As a result, the infection is going up. Confidence level is misleading to the society. Young people believe they're not going to die. They are infected, they will be okay. So they're infecting other older people. People like me are scared now to come out from the house, go to the business, because the government is telling me, don't come to the business. Government telling people test and trace is under control. My business partner, my nephew, wanted to go for a test and he is advised to go 300 miles. He wants to travel 300 miles for his quest. A government like British government, a world-leading economy, world-leading NHS service, telling me now, go for a test for 300 miles.
Okay, Pasha Bhai, I'll come back to you on that. We will have to go for a short
Really
break.
unbelievable.
Obviously, you're staying with us. After the break, we will ask Mr. Afroz about his comment in terms of the concerns raised by Councillor Santos and Pasha Bhai. So we will, after the short break, we are coming back. So stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর আমরা ফিরে এসেছি আজকের আলাপচারিতায়। অবশ্যই বিষয় কোভিড ম্যানেজমেন্ট অফ COVID-19, and I have guests. On my left is Councillor Mark Santos. Next to him is Mumshed Afrouz, and joining us on virtually is Pasha Khandekar, former president of BCA. Thank you, Pasha Bhai, for staying with us. So we are going back to now Mr. Mumshed Afrouz. Mumshed, you are in the hot seat. You have heard the concerns raised by Pasha Bhai and Councillor Santos. How do you think the government is doing in terms of managing the COVID-19 situation?
I think it's been very difficult from the word go. COVID-19 is a new phenomenon. I don't think any government had the foresight to, make the necessary preparation, and it's always been a moving target. So obviously we've been playing catch up in that sense. But I think government has learned a lot from the first wave. I know a lot of people are making a song and dance about the many U-turns government had made. What I would say to that is, it's not U-turn the way I see it. It's about correcting, your course in a changing environment, and that's very, very important. It's no point saying from the onset, this is the plan, and we're going to just run with it without having some flexibility built into that plan. So the fact the government is recognizing these are, some of the factors are very dynamic and they're constantly moving, and therefore they are revising their plans accordingly. So it's not a U-turn, it's just being flexible. It's reflecting, the moving situation in which we find ourselves in.
Okay, so as Mr. Khandekar was saying, and as Councillor Santos has indicated, that people, general public, are very confused in terms of what exactly are the government saying. Should we go out? Should we stay inside? Should the pubs continue to remain open? Schools are open. People are mixing in the workplaces. People are advised to use public transport. At the same time, you are saying, government is saying there is a second wave, second surge on its way. But what we are also hearing from number of leading scientists, naming Professor Carl Hennigan, who is saying that the second surge is possibly more imminent around the winter time, November, December, and not now. Okay, so the trajectory that we are talking about, what we heard around 11 o'clock this morning, the data that they're kind of basing this prediction or trajectory, how reliable are these data? So that's again another question, because as Pasha Bhai was saying, in the past people have lost confidence in terms of the data that you are sharing, the information that you are giving, which seems very misleading. At the same time, you're talking about circuit breaking processes. At the same time, you're trying to save the businesses. What we heard today is that there's going to be £500 incentive for people to remain in isolation if they are identified as positive, or in connection or in close contact with someone who is identified as COVID positive, where the NHS track and tracing system will continue to support those people or those families, and government will give them £500 financial support. At the same time, what you are claiming, the government is claiming that the test and tracking system is working, and what we believe the government has said that 250,000 testing per day is taking place. But we surely know that's not enough, because general public are saying either they have to travel 300 miles for their testing, or as Councillor Santos has said, that the walk-in center, walk-in testing facility have been closed off. So where exactly are you investing the energy and the commitment? Is that test, track and isolation, or giving people some incentive, which absolutely is not going to be enough to save the economy and save the people's welfare?
Sure. Let's recognize that when we had this outbreak, the government scientific advisor, entertained the possibility there could be a second wave with the onset of the winter. So it is not completely unexpected. With that in mind, government had done a lot of preparation, not just centrally, but with the local authority to put the measures and provisions in place to be able to deal with the second outbreak.
What measures are you referring
let
to?
Let me just opine that I think it's very, very important for your viewers who are listening at home not get diverted by these Labour, and I have to be reserved with my words here, with Labour propaganda. And that is what it is. Labour is feeding a lot of misinformation in the public domain, trying to skew the public opinion in their favour and trying to, build a political capital out of this crisis, which I think is really beneath them. They really need to square up to the fact that, if they want to play constructive opposition, they need to come up with credible, policy ideas which they could share with the government. But instead, all they've been doing is just scaremongering. Now let's look at the facts. The fact is, government's intention, based on the scientific advice, has always been to maintain the infection rate, the rate of R, below 1%. We know that has breached. It's ranging between 1.1 to 1.4, which means every 10% who is identified with COVID-19.
And you do not accept that that's as a result of the test, track and isolation system not being working properly?
No, what I'm saying
is... Because you're blaming the people.
No, what I'm saying is this coincides with the onset of winter, which is when we normally, under normal circumstances, we see a spike in flu-like symptoms. Okay, so this is not a coincidence. We anticipated this is what might happen, and government has put enough measures in place to be able to deal with that. Now, going back to the numbers,
you keep on saying enough measures. What exactly constitutes enough measures?
Government has provided every local council with additional funding
to do what?
To provide the information that they need. So in terms,
we have a £43 million gap as a result of coronavirus in Redbridge and the coronavirus costs. The government have nowhere met those needs. And it's not propaganda. It really is not propaganda.
But Mark,
when I'm talking to,
has the government
it's not propaganda when I hear from my resident that they have to travel from Redbridge to Ramsgate to get a test. It's not propaganda when I hear from a deputy head of a school that she cannot go into school because she cannot get a test. The government, as we've heard, have apparently been aware that this is going to happen. So where is the preparation? Where is the capacity and accessibility of the tests? Why have the people been let down? And actually, I'll give some constructive advice to this government. I will give some constructive advice, and here it is. Don't worry about moonshots. Don't worry about world beating. Just get a good enough test and trace system in place so that we can navigate this COVID risk as a society and live our life within the context of coronavirus.
Pasha Khandekar, Pasha Bhai, your observations, your comments, Pasha Bhai.
I would like to say, as a business man, most important is now that people must trust the government. If we wanted to be trustworthy,
Pasha Bhai, sorry, why do you think people have lost confidence or trust on the government?
Not confidence, trust. Confidence even is it, because they are misleading us. They are misleading the business. Listen, these track and trace words from the Matt Hancock, for the last 6 months we've been listening from him. I am more than sure that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Because if he knows what he's talking about, he must have something by now. The gentleman, I'm not sure what Mark, he said, my nephew got 3 disabled kids in his house. And he feels pain in himself, and he's got something else his ear. He rang the NHS for help, and they asked him for 300 miles for help. Why should the people trust the government? What's this? Then again, this gentleman saying, the Tory party gentleman saying that the winter is normally a spike time. I'm not agreeing. Because the coronavirus, we understand this coronavirus from last January. I know we should. Government scientists must know how to control it. And what we found now, because of government confusing things, lastminute.com advance, young people are just coming everywhere. Universities open. I opened my business. Government helped me for funding people to come. Now they're saying that I cannot open my restaurant after 10 o'clock. Maybe next week you'll say, no, you're shut. This is not fair. You must have to have a plan what you are doing.
Let me bring some other points, because obviously what we are hearing is that the testing system being the significant challenge from the government to manage. However, at the same time, other European countries are facing similar problems, because I think Spain is ahead of us, but we have seen in Madrid they're bringing more or less a national lockdown in Madrid and in Spain, and especially in Madrid. So other European countries are in a similar condition, similar situation with us, like Britain, but at the same time, the number of initiatives that the government has so far offered, don't you think that's supporting the process in terms of boosting the businesses?
Can you tell me one thing? Why these governments splitting us? Why Scotland, Wales, and England? He is the Prime Minister for this Great Britain, United Kingdom. He is not capable to lead us in one nation. So this, I'm telling you, as just a normal businessman, small businessman, I want my life first, then my business. So don't bring me in my business and kill me. I want my business and life together. And I want you to look after me because you are the authority. I vote you to run this government. You are confusing me.
You heard what people are saying. I mean, as I was saying, today we have heard that government is giving £500 incentive for people who are should be isolating, to support them if they lose their or lost livelihood or earning. But instead of, as Pasha Bhai was saying, instead of offering all these incentives, which are obviously appreciated and welcomed, but at the same time, there should be significant investment on increasing the number of testing, tracking, and this whole system being as effective as it should be, and how we were promised that when we came out of the national lockdown, we were clearly promised the reason we are coming out is because this test and tracking system is in place, and that would identify people at a much earlier stage, and that would help people to remain in isolation, and that would stop the spreading. But surely that hasn't worked, has it?
No, I think the benchmark we set ourselves was that as long as the rate of R is below 1, we will keep things fairly open and non-restrictive. The fact that the rate of infection has now ramped up, obviously government needs to step up and ensure that
Yeah, but you're stepping up by saying, blaming people, and by
not blaming. I don't think government has. I mean, if you can quote one government minister who has said that people are to be blamed for this, then I'll rest my case. But I don't think that has been the case.
That has been the case, because
who has? Yeah, has the Prime Minister alluded to this? I don't think he ever has.
That the tone was very much blaming the people, holding the people responsible for the spreading, rather than the test and tracking system being an effective
No, I think there's been, look, I think there's been...
criticise people for carping on about the lack of testing. Carping on about the lack of testing. Imagine the anxiety that you go to
Rees-Mogg is not a government minister, and he does not sit at the cabinet.
He's the leader of the House. And he sits, you imagine going to a testing centre, you have the anxiety that you or your family member are tested, or have coronavirus, and then you are turned away. And he's saying people are carping on about it. This is a key tool in the toolbox about managing coronavirus risk. And he says you're carping on about it.
Because you're increasing the fines on people who are not maintaining the isolation or who are kind of multiple perpetrators. But then again, you're not accepting, and as the Labour leader said, that the government should apologise for not being able to offer the level of the number of testing that they promised from the beginning. So where exactly you stand? How do you think people would be able to have the trust back on the government?
I think if it's a question of trust,
that's what Pasha was saying.
If it's a question of trust, I personally think, people have no reason not to trust the government. It is in government's national interest to make sure that, we are on the front foot in terms of dealing with the COVID-19. Now, the current testing level stands at just under, 250,000. Ideally, we want to get to 500,000 testing a day. Government, as
so
we speak,
there is
a big gap, and there is a recognition. We're not going into this blindsided. We are saying, and we are acknowledging, there is a huge gap and a big mountain to climb.
So 7 months down the line, from March, 7 months down the line, you still haven't managed to get to that point.
You've got to appreciate this is a pandemic. That means every nation on planet Earth has been affected by this outbreak one way or the other. That means those who are producing the kits, businesses that are producing these kits, there's a huge supply shock.
Do you know what exactly are the challenges in terms of offering half a million tests a day? What's stopping the government offering 500,000 tests a day?
It's the manufacturing side. It is the manufacturing side, because it's not just UK government wanting these kits. It's all other national governments. Okay, so it has suddenly put these manufacturers under enormous pressure in terms of being able to supply.
It's actually about laboratory capacity, and they should have known that there was going to be a surge in demand and have the laboratory capacity.
We will come back after a short break.
But we are not in this unique situation ourselves. Other governments are on the same boat.
We will be back after a short break. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you can react.
ওকে, দর্শক, আমরা ছোট্ট বিজ্ঞাপন বিরতির পর ফিরে এসেছি আজকের আলাপচারিতার শেষ অংশে। অবশ্যই আমরা কথা বলছি ম্যানেজমেন্ট অফ কোভিড-19 অথবা করোনা ভাইরাস এবং বর্তমান সরকারের ম্যানেজমেন্ট অফ করোনা ভাইরাস নিয়ে বিভিন্ন মতামত রয়েছে, পক্ষে বিপক্ষে। আমাদের সঙ্গে রয়েছেন কাউন্সিলর মার্ক সান্তোস, রয়েছেন মুমশেদ আফরুজ রিপ্রেজেন্টিং কনজারভেটিভ পার্টি, এবং আমার সঙ্গে রয়েছেন পাশা খন্দকার, ফর্মার প্রেসিডেন্ট অফ বিসিএ এবং একজন বিশিষ্ট ব্যবসায়ী। সো at this point, Pasha Bhai, I would like to come to you in terms of help us understand what would be the level of impact on businesses, especially hospitality sector, if we face another national lockdown or circuit breaking processes that we have heard by the government, that may be some sort of curfews, that the restaurants will have to be shut at 10 o'clock, or they will only be able to offer takeaway services, or they will only be able to offer seating inside the restaurant rather than outside. So what would be the impact on, especially on the hospitality sector, as well as businesses that are directly involved with the hospitality sectors?
Thank you. The hospitality sector is suffering. There's like other sectors as well. It's mainly because it's a high street business. But I must say, the government policy previously was really good. We have a very good incentive like loan, credit scheme, eat out, help out policies. I must say that we must be ready for any bad news. But I will ask government know what kind of impact it will be, and especially with the restaurants. If they give us the country fine, we understand this. To save the nation, we'll go to our restaurants, but we want government to fund us so we can pay our staff that can stay inside home, yeah, and they don't have to worry about their daily life. And the previously resistant was, I must say, he was doing absolutely superb in our policy, which was most welcomed by the business people, and we really appreciate it. And we are still surviving because of the government help. But if there is a possibility for the future danger, there will be a close down for the restaurant, pubs, hotels still suffering. But we can manage if the government policy remains same and don't stop the furlough on October, because October is the dangerous time. November, December, and we'll ask government to give us plenty of time. Okay, don't tell us do it tomorrow. Give us plenty of time, that at least a week notice. Because you got the logistics supposed to tell us what to do. You got your bureaucracy, you got your scientists, you know what. I mean, so why you tell us 24 hours before or 12 hours before? Give us enough time so we can be prepared. We wanted to remember, this is the most dangerous for the world. So my appeal to the government, please give us a confidence. What you turn or change your mind, don't do it too much. Because we already lost our confidence with you. We wanted to trust government. We wanted to see our NHS safe. And people don't want to die. Don't blame us. We don't want to die. We want you to live in this world. You help us, and we will be with you.
Speed is essence here. So speedy actions is something that we must consider and implement here. So what Pasha Khondokar is saying in terms of how the businesses would survive in this kind of very difficult time, do you think that government is actually consciously taking the decisions that they are taking, where there is a fine balance between saving the economy versus saving the lives of the people?
Absolutely, and that has always been the key. Balancing the two, interests. Because I think if you prioritize one over the other, then there's going to be a massive fallout. We want to ensure that we come out at the end of this with our economy fairly unscathed. So, as part of the initial response, we're trying to respond in a way that would allow us to curb the rate of infection, which I believe we managed to do with the first wave. And then obviously simultaneously there was a whole raft of policy initiatives to ensure that we shore up our economy, and some of the things the BCA chairman has outlined. Now the question is, what is going to be the economic package to ensure these businesses are able to weather?
So what will be the economic package that we could expect from the Prime Minister's meeting tomorrow, that he had indicated that there could be stricter sanctions coming soon following his COBRA meeting tomorrow?
Look, I'm not part of the government, so I'm not privy to the granular level detail, so we have to wait and see, as and when the announcements are made. But my expectation and the expectation of any rational being would be that, if you are curtailing people's movement and putting restrictions on how people go about doing their businesses, then obviously that has a repercussion on, their profit base. And that means government in a limited capacity where possible, because, we also have to recognize that we have to live within our own means.
The government is actually making decisions more or less in isolation. They are not involving the councils. They're not involving
the
businesses.
Absolutely not the case.
They are not involving people who actually would be in a much better position to advise the government in terms of what should and shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely not the case, because small businesses, big enterprises, they have been an active participant, active agent in the policy formulation. There's been a constant dialogue with the government and various ministries in making sure.
No, the government isn't listening. We saw that by the fact that my understanding is that COBRA hasn't met since the 15th of May. So during this whole of this pandemic, there hasn't been that opportunity for the government's ideas to be constructively challenged and for us to have a better solution. And if tomorrow we don't hear how the government is going to fix the testing system and fix track and trace, then I think they will have failed again and failed the people in our community. And on a very basic level, they can't get right the instructions to Deloitte and Serco, the private companies that run the testing service, to communicate with councils. When we were aware that there was a spike of coronavirus in Redbridge, we put out leaflets to households which were most effective, and on them we talked about there being a walk-in facility at our Mildmay Road service in Ilford, and they didn't tell us that they were going to cut that service back. So we promoted, so that's the level of communication. They won't now tell us, they've been instructed by government not to tell us how many tests are happening at that test centre. They're not helping us to plan at all.
So what do you have to say about, because obviously government, if the claim is that the government is involving people from all sectors who would be in a better position to advise the government, and it's more of a kind of people-government partnership rather than government making decisions on its own and obviously making a shamble of it.
The example he has cited,
that's one of the examples.
Yeah, it's one of the examples he has cited. I like to believe that's an outlier, and it's not systematic of the government's approach, and I don't believe this has been the case. Overwhelmingly, I think the government's response is working. It is debatable whether it is working at the right level. I'm not going to sit here and look at this crisis through a rose-tinted glass. I'm a human being, a fully paid member of the human society. So I'm not going to sit here and say, everything is rosy and the government has done everything by the book. No, the government hasn't. But we learn from our mistakes. We were all human beings. This is a pandemic at a level that we have not seen in our lifetime. The last time.
Dominic Cummings. We talked about trust earlier on. The whole situation with Dominic Cummings broke trust. It was a moment in time when this is looked back on by historians. They will say that those are the moments when government started to lose the trust of the people, when they started to promise things that they couldn't deliver and actually didn't get the basics right.
Okay, we have a caller online. Caller, who is on the line? Assalamu alaikum.
Hello.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. When I say that how can we control the spread of this virus when at the workplace, when people are being encouraged to go back to employment, universities are open, schools are open. Surely these are the most infection spreading sites, and we have been told to isolate no more than 6 people at home. Surely home is not the at fault here. It's the workplace and the transport and public transport, underground, workplace, schools. So when you have got those places running in full swing, it is self-contradictory, isn't it?
Okay. Thank you, caller. Thank you for your question. I'm sure Mumshad would be able to respond.
If I could just respond to that from a personal perspective, my employer. As part of our business continuity planning, we've been advised at any one point in time, at most we will operate at 50% staff capacity. That means the rest of the 50% will work from home. And that's including maintaining a 2-meter social distancing. So we're not,
but surely there is an active encouragement from the government for people to return to work and making the
people
business
to return to work, but by following the guidelines that's been issued. The government is not saying, let's go back to normal the way, we were operating pre-COVID-19. Government is saying, let's go back to business in line with the,
but
what we have advised.
As you can hear, that communication line is not very clear, because obviously as a general member of the public is confused and not clear what exactly is the line. On one hand, as I was saying in my comments at the beginning, that on one hand we are asked, go back, lead a normal life as far as possible, send your children to school. If you don't send, you'll be fined. Use public transport. The cities, the shops in the cities, the offices in the cities should remain open to support the economy. And at the next line, you're saying actually COVID is increasing, but we will not be able to support the level of tests that is the demand is there. So where exactly we stand?
No, as I said before, there is a mismatch in demand and supply.
Yeah.
And we recognise that, and we're trying to obviously.
But what exactly is your plan? What are you saying to the people of United Kingdom that at the moment we are offering 250,000 plus testing a day?
They're talking nonsense. That's what they're doing. They're talking about moonshots. They're talking about world-beating services. They're talking about making it possible to go grouse shooting. They're not actually fixing the basics, and that's where they should be focusing all of their attention 24 hours a day, every day of the week.
No, they're working with the service providers to whom we have outsourced these services and the production of the testing kit. So, we are ramping up our capability. But as I said, we haven't got a magic wand, and, it's not going to be an overnight solution. So,
but none of this was a surprise. None of this demand. You tell people to go back to work. You get people going back to school. People going to university, and then you don't. And you're surprised when there was a surge. I find that unbelievable.
We don't have much time left. Pasha Bhai, obviously we have heard your concerns and some suggestions that you have put forward to the government in relation to helping the business. So from the community perspective, from the people's perspective, what are the things that we should be doing to keep us safe from this surge of coronavirus or spreading of coronavirus?
Very important thing. Our community, to be honest, I mean, like BME fatality rate is high. And our community is not very careful. And some places, some part of our community is not doing their responsible job. They are not listening to the government instructions. Everybody knows it. That if you go to the shopping center, especially grocery shops, restaurants, but then I can easily see the people are not listening at all about the COVID safety instructions. So my appeal to the community, please listen to the government. Don't make a mistake. And especially, I will ask the Tower Council that if they have the COVID marshal, they should mobilize them in the street to impose the instructions to save the people, and especially save our elderly people, our senior people.
Those comments that it's really important in terms of being able to manage coronavirus risk that people wear face coverings, covering their mouth and their nose in small spaces, in public transport, in shops, at school gates, that they wash their hands with soap and hot water, or if that's not available, use hand sanitizer, and to remember to keep a physical distance, remember respiratory hygiene. And also, we're just coming into the flu season, and actually, if you're eligible for a flu vaccination, to take it up. This year more than ever, it's really important that you take it up. So remember all those factors that keep you safe, and if you're eligible for a flu vaccine, please
so
take the flu vaccine.
that's your advice for the people. What would be your advice for the government?
My advice for the government would be to focus on getting the basics right, get the test and trace system working, work with local government in particular about the contact tracing service, and get the testing service out, because it's a key tool for us to be able to navigate COVID risk going forwards.
Mumshad, obviously finally to you, in terms of what is your position at this stage, listening to what the business community has to say, what the Labour Party is saying, how would you think that the government is going to fulfill its commitment and bring the trust back in terms of management of COVID-19, and if there is a second surge, how do you think that people would respond?
Sure, I think it's very, very important the government to have an open dialogue, not just with the business communities of people at large, and have a joined up effort with the local councils. And one of the reasons why I think that is so important, because the local councils have the local knowledge and the know-how to actually deliver the government's program. So if the dots are not joined up, it's not going to work. It's going to be a disjointed process. So I completely take what Mark is saying on board. We need to have a two-way dialogue with the central government and work in partnership to beat this, what is a national crisis. And just to echo what the BCA ex-chairman just said, I do recognise and feel his pain, but rest assured the government, in the same way they have initially responded with an economic package, I would be surprised if there wasn't another package, accompanying any kind of restriction on movement or restriction on businesses. So there's no need for us to, second guess the government.
Okay.
Let's wait and see,
what the Prime Minister says tomorrow. So thank you very much. Thank you, Council Santos, and
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
much. Thank you very much.
Afroz. Thank you, Pasha Bhai, for your time. And আগামী সোমবারের অনুষ্ঠান দেখার আমন্ত্রণ জানিয়ে শেষ করছি এবং আবারও সবাইকে মনে করিয়ে দিতে চাই যে স্বাস্থ্য বিধিনিষেধ মেনে আমাদের সকলকে নিজেদেরকে সুস্থ রাখা, নিজেদেরকে সাবধানে রাখা যেমন প্রয়োজন, এবং সেভাবেই অন্যদেরকেও এই করোনা ভাইরাসের আক্রমণ থেকে বা সংক্রমণ থেকে রক্ষা করাও আমাদের দায়িত্ব। শুভরাত্রি।